Welcome to day 363. We're in Revelation 11 through 14. Everybody take a deep breath. This is December 28th, if you're doing it in order from January 1st. And I want to say to you, I told you from the beginning the book of Revelation would take some time. And we have a lot today. But it is absolutely important. Today is one of the most important things to be listening carefully to, because we're dealing with a timing issue. And when I say take a deep breath, it's really talking about, I've seen all these things. John's seen all these things, okay? And it's like, wait a second. I got to describe the people who are in all of this stuff that I'm seeing. I got to describe what I see with these angels. I got to describe what I'm seeing with Satan and the Antichrist and the false prophet. I got to write all this stuff down. So we say that these middle chapters in Revelation are kind of like taking a breath and going back and describing some things. And as I continue, I've alluded to this, I will tell you all about that. All right, so we start in chapter 11, and it's all about, starts out with all about the two witnesses. So let's really get at this. They're clothed in burlap. They are telling their testimony, giving a testimony about the good news for 1,260 days. If you divide that by 360, that's 3.5 years. And back then, they used to count a year by 360 days. Okay. That's in the beginning of chapter 11. They are described as the two olive trees and the two lampstands that stand before God. So olive trees, that helps to understand that's a representation of Israel, and lampstands meaning something very important in front of God. And fire comes from their mouths and consumes anyone who tries to harm them. So they're doing this for 3.5 years. So the question is, when is all this taking place? Let's talk about their power, and then I'm going to talk about timing. Chapter 11, verse 6. They have the power to stop the rain, to make the rivers and the oceans into blood, and all the different types of plagues they want to do as long and as often as they want to do them. So they can do, the point is, it's not just going to be one thing. They have the power to do it as often as they want, as long as they want. Who are these two? It's possible we have no idea. So I want to make sure I say that first. But the scholars say that it's maybe Enoch in Genesis 5:22, maybe Elijah, 2 Kings 2:11, 1 Kings 17:1, 2 Kings 1:10, Moses in the book of Exodus, all those different things he did, all the plagues he did. So these are all things that these people, God used to do things with. So really the scholars think it's going to be Elijah and Moses. But in reality, we don't really know. Okay? So let's just talk about timing real quickly here. There are many people that say this is going to happen at the last 3.5 years of the tribulation. So this is when things really start to go wrong, and there's other reasons in here why they say that, and they say so the rapture is not going to happen until the middle of the tribulation. Well, there's nothing about the timing of the two witnesses or the fact that Satan comes in and he stops the sacrifices in the temple and desecrates the temple at the middle of the tribulation. That has nothing to do with a mid-tribulational rapture. And here's the other thing. This 3.5 years that the two witnesses are giving their testimony isn't necessarily the beginning half and the last half. We tend to like to put everything either first half or last half, and we don't accept that, well, maybe it started year 2, 4 months, 3 days. That's when it started, and then it lasts for 3.5 years. So we have to get away from this first half, last half thing. But there is something about the first half and last half. Okay, so that's why many scholars just kind of assume that the two witnesses are going to be there during the last 3.5 years. But let me give you some information. Little old me. Okay, so after their testimony. So after their 3.5 years, the beast from the bottomless pit comes up, wages war against them, and kills them. That's chapter 11, verse 7. He declares war against them, and he will conquer them and kill them. Okay? And their bodies lie in the main street for 3.5 days. All right, stop for a second. So the beast from the bottomless pit, where was that at? Oh, yeah, that was in, let's see, the 6th trumpet, maybe? Let's see here, the 6th trumpet. No, the 5th trumpet, I'm sorry, it was the 5th trumpet. Then the angel, 5th angel blew his trumpet, and a star that had fallen to earth from the sky, he was given the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit. When he opened it, smoke poured out as though from a huge furnace, and the sunlight and air turned dark from the smoke. Verse 11, their king is the angel from the bottomless pit. His name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek, Apollyon, the destroyer. So it says the beast from the bottomless pit kills them. That's at the 5th trumpet. Now, again, we don't know exactly how these things are playing in the chronological or events. We think that these are in order because you're breaking a seal and you're breaking another seal. Those are in order. We don't know how long everything is. If it's a month, it's a week, a day. Maybe it's just something that continues and another one overlaps it. And you have to think of timing through all of this, okay? So because it's the 5th trumpet, we can accept that maybe it is mid-tribulational time that the two witnesses come. But again, that has no bearing on the rapture. Okay? So why am I taking my time? Timing of all of this is very important for today's lesson. Understanding not to be so rigid on this. You have to take a moment and say this could happen pretty much in this area. It doesn't have to be exactly in the mid-tribulational part. Definitely not going to be at the beginning, okay? No one's allowed to bury them. They lie there for 3.5 days. All the people gloat and give presents. I mean, it's like a big party. They're celebrating. Look at what these guys happened to them. Why 3.5 days? Why did Jesus lay in the tomb for three days? Because ritually, in the old days, you waited 3 days to make sure the person was dead. Okay? So anyway, they're there for 3.5 days. No one's allowed to bury them, and they all celebrated. And then God breathes life into them and terrifies everybody, okay? Calls them to heaven, so they are raised up to heaven. It's not just, oh, they're dead, oh, they must be in heaven now. No, God makes it visually happen, where they rise up, come to life, and they are on clouds going up into heaven, and it terrorizes everybody. There's a great earthquake. 1/10 of the city is destroyed. 7,000 people died. I don't know if you want to enter that as your number 7. I don't think so. But interesting that it's 7,000. 7,000 people died from the earthquake, and everyone gave glory to God in heaven. That's the craziest thing. That's verse 13 of chapter 11. Everyone gave glory to God. Whenever there's calamity, everybody bends the knee to God. But yet, they then turn around and are rebellious against him. All right, that's the end of the second terror, which is the 6th trumpet, okay? So the 5th trumpet brings Apollyon, the destroyer, to kill the two witnesses during the time of the 6th trumpet judgment. Okay, so there's your overlap. So timing is critical that we aren't rigid with all of this. The third terror is the 7th trumpet. So we finally get to the 7th trumpet today. Yesterday was the 6th trumpets. Okay, and what happens then? There's another earthquake and hailstorm. That's in verse 19 of chapter 11. And the Ark of the Covenant is seen in heaven, and judgment begins. So let's continue with this. And so I finished my 7th trumpet one here. We're not getting to the bowl judgment. That's I believe that starts tomorrow. But we are going to continue our list of Satan, the Antichrist, and also the false prophet. So we're adding to the list of Satan, adding a few more things to Antichrist because they're all described throughout the Bible. And the false prophet, though, that is now described today in today's reading. So let's get at those things. We have the woman and the dragon. So we're in chapter 12 now. The woman is clothed with the sun, has the moon beneath her feet. So that's a description of Israel. Has a crown of 12 stars on her head. The 12 stars represent the 12 tribes of Israel. So let's go back, way back to Genesis. Woohoo! Way back to Genesis, which we talked about this. Genesis 37:9, okay? And this is Joseph having a dream. Soon Joseph had another dream, and again he told his brothers about it. Listen, I have had another dream, he said. The sun and moon, and 11 stars bowed low before me. Well, that's 11 stars. This says 12 stars. Oh, wait a minute. Joseph's the 12th star. Okay, so that's the representation that this is Israel. The woman goes into labor and has a baby. That's Jesus. So let's talk about labor pains. We go to Isaiah 66:7. And this is important to go back and look at the stuff that we've read. Before the birth pains even begin, before there's pain, Jerusalem gives birth to a son. Okay? Who has ever seen anything as strange as this? Whoever has heard such a thing? Has a nation ever been born in a single day? We talked about that. May 15th, 1948, Israel got their land back in one day after a whole lot of pain and suffering. But Jesus was born before they were exiled and kicked out of their land for 2,500 years. Okay? Granted, there's a couple exiles in there, but let's not get too crazy with the technical part of that, okay? But definitely World War II killed 6 million Israelites, and definitely those were birth pains, and there have been birth pains ever since. So that's the labor pains. If we read Matthew 24, verse 8, verse 7, nation will go to war against nation and kingdom against kingdom, okay? So there's your red horse. Going out to create wars and win the victory. That's the white horse and the red horse and the pale horse and the black horse. There will be famines and earthquakes in many parts of the world. Remember, we talked about famines and disease and earthquakes and wild animals. But all this is only the first of the birth pains, with more to come. So if you think of World War II as a huge birth pain, and just think of it's ramping up more as birth pains go, they get closer and closer together. And think about that. Then Mark 13:8. Let's just go to that fairly quickly here. 13:8. It says, it should just be a reiteration of this. Nation will go to war against nation, kingdom against kingdom. So these are just the Gospels reiterating or repeating themselves. And then we go to the description of the baby being Jesus, to rule with an iron rod. We talked about the iron rod in chapter 12, verse 5. Sorry, I'm in the wrong place here. She gave birth to a son who is to rule all nations with an iron rod. And then Jesus is taken to heaven, the same verse. And her child was snatched away from the dragon and was caught up to God and to his throne. Okay, so the woman fled into the wilderness where God had prepared a place to care for her for 1,260 days, 3.5 years. Okay, so we are now in chapter 12. And what are we talking about? We're in Revelation. Why aren't we talking about the end of the world? Why are we talking about the birth pains? And why are we talking about Jesus being born? Well, here's the breadth that I was talking about. Chapter 12, 13 and 14, part of 15. As we get into the last part and get into the bowl judgments, before we get to the bowl judgments, John is now describing the players in the game, if you will, or the great Game of Thrones. And he is He's describing Israel. He's describing that Satan was there. He was trying to take Jesus away by killing him. Satan doesn't have access to the future. He doesn't know what's going to happen, only what he can read in the Bible. Okay, so God knows the future. Okay, so Satan all along has tried to kill the baby boys. Okay, multiple times, twice it happened where he tried to kill the young kids, trying to kill Jesus. Okay, so keep that in mind. So John's describing this, and Jesus is taken up to heaven because Satan's like, oh, we killed him finally, yes, but wait a second, oops, that's exactly what needed to happen to save all these people. So he describes that. And then he describes the woman fleeing to the wilderness. When is that? Well, that's somewhere near the middle of the tribulation where the Antichrist or Satan turns on Israel. There's peace. Remember diplomacy. The white horse comes with a bow. He's coming through diplomacy, creating peace, a false peace with Israel, and maybe to allow them to build their temple, to gather more of the Jews into one place so that he can kill them, and he turns on them. And we learn about that. I'll talk about that in a second. So I think this 1260 days where they flee into the wilderness, they go to Petra, the rock city. They get on planes and fly and leave as fast as they can because Satan has now come down to heaven to hurt them. So I've kind of gotten ahead of myself, but that's the timing we're getting here. John is describing this part of Revelation that's happening, the whole realm in a brief moment of history of what's happened. And then he says, then there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon and his angels. And the dragon lost the battle. Dragon is Satan. And he and his angels were forced out of heaven. This great dragon, the ancient serpent, called the devil or Satan. So there you go, the dragon, Satan. The one deceiving the whole world, was thrown down to earth with all his angels. Okay? Then it talks about there's voices in heaven and talking about the things to come. Verse 12, but terror will come on the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you in great anger, knowing that he has little time. So don't mistake this. Again, the last 3.5 years of tribulation, we say 3.5 years because this is about this time. Again, don't be too rigid about this. So somewhere in the middle of the tribulation, Satan comes down and he takes over. And it's horrible. But it's already been horrible. Have you missed the first 14 judgments? Don't forget those, okay? Don't let that cloud your judgment. All right. So let's read verse 3. When the dragon realized that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman, Israel, but she was given wings like those of a great eagle, so she could fly to a place prepared for her in the wilderness. There she would be cared for and protected from the dragon for a time, times, and half a time. So there's Daniel's time, times, and half a time. We can go back, and we should, and read Daniel's time, times, and half a times. Where is it? Okay, so verse 11, Daniel 12:11. From the time the daily sacrifices stopped, somewhere in the middle of the tribulation, where the Antichrist and the false prophet and Satan pursue Israel, they stop the sacrilege. They stop the sacrifices, and the sacrilegious object that causes desecration is set up to be worshipped. There will be 1290 days. And blessed are those who wait and remain until the end of the 13 and 35 days. So this is a perfect setup to say 1290 days, just 3.5 years, and then a little bit longer or just under 3.5 years, and then 13 and 35, just around 3.5 years. There's a time period where Satan is in control of everything, and he's pursuing all the Christians and the Jews that didn't make it into safety. And then at the very end, he calls the armies together, and it takes time, 45 days or so, to pull all the armies of the world together to go to Armageddon. So there's a timing issue there. We can't know the day or the hour that Christ comes. So to say it's exactly in the middle of tribulation is not true. So we say the middle of tribulation as just kind of jesting, saying around that time. Okay? Sorry, I cannot see. I can't find real quickly where the times, and half the time is. But we did talk about it when we talked about the read through Daniel. Really is upsetting me. I can't find that. I'm sorry. So it's extremely important that we get the timing of all this stuff. Anyway, he said it. Actually, he didn't say it. It was told to him. Keep it a secret, for this is going to happen for a time, times, and half a time. And just right off the top, I can't find it. So, well, let's move on. Let's see here. I have Matthew 24, 15 through 22. So Matthew, go back to Matthew 24, 15, verses 15 through 22. The day's coming when you will see what Daniel the prophet spoke about, the sacrilegious object that causes desecration, standing in the holy place. We haven't gotten to this in Revelation yet, but we're close. Okay? Then those in Judea must flee to the hills. A person out on the deck of a roof must not go down into the house to pack. A person out in the field must not return to even to get a coat. How terrible it will be for pregnant women. And pray that your flight will not be in the winter or on the Sabbath. For there will be greater anguish than at any time since the world began. And it will never be so great again. In fact, unless that time of calamity is shortened, not a single person will survive. But it will be shortened for the sake of God's chosen ones. So we read that when we read Matthew. And this is what this is talking about. We are at the point about mid-tribulation wise where Satan or the Antichrist turns his back on Israel. Okay? All right. So he declares war on the children of Israel. Let's see, 12:17. It says, and the dragon was angry at the woman and declared war against the rest of her children. Okay, so back up. The rest of her children. So what happened to them? Well, we already said they went into the wilderness and were protected. So here's what happened. Verse 15. Then the dragon tried to drown the woman with a flood of water that flowed from his mouth. Yes, it could be a total flood, literal flood of water coming from his mouth. Okay, but we already know that the dragon is Satan. Okay, so we're figuratively speaking here, I think. Remember, it's a conversation. And the flood of water, I believe, is just an army of people chasing after them. But then the earth opens up and swallows them up, just like it did in the Old Testament and swallowed up the people when they're out in the wilderness and they had worshipped idols and stuff. So totally believe that's going to happen. All right, so there's a protection for the people there. But then he says, I declare war on the rest of the children. Christians that are in the world, the Jewish people that never made it there in the world. So that should tell you something, that not all Jewish people are going to make it back to Israel. Okay. Dang. Daniel 7, 20 through 21. Oops, I went too far. I also asked about the 10 horns on the fourth beast's head and the little horn that came up afterward and destroyed 3 of the other horns. This horn had seemed greater than the others, and it had human eyes and a mouth that was boasting arrogantly. As I watched, this horn was waging war against God's holy people and was defeating them, until the Ancient One, the Most High, came and judged in favor of his holy people, Armageddon. Then the time arrived for the holy people to take over the kingdom, the 1,000-year reign. Okay, so that's a little bit ahead of schedule. I mean, I'm getting ready to say it right now, but I wanted to say that there was war waged, and that's what we read about in Daniel. Chapter 13. The Antichrist. So we read about Satan. Let's read about the Antichrist. He comes up out of the sea what? The sea of people. he is voted into power. So again, this is the beginning of the tribulation. He's coming up, he's being voted into power. He is the white horse. Again, this is these middle chapters that John has taken a moment to describe the things he's seen, these key players, and what they're doing during this time period. Okay? He has 7 heads and 10 horns with 10 crowns. 7 heads, so here's your 7s. And on those 7 heads, he has 10 horns. Now he has 7 heads, so he has 10 crowns as well. So there's some more crowns for you. And it appears to be a leopard, a bear, and a lion. So let's read that. This beast looked like a leopard, but it had the feet of a bear and the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave the beast his own power and throne and great authority. So Satan gave the Antichrist his own power and throne and great authority. That's what happened when the first seal was hit, was broken. Okay, let's read in Daniel 7, verse 6. Daniel 7, verse 6. Then the third of these strange beasts appeared, and it looked like a leopard. Okay? A bear. Verse 5. Then I saw a second beast, and it looked like a bear. And verse 4. The first beast was like a lion. Notice we went third, second, and first beast. Okay? Those aren't the ones. Those have already come to power. Okay? So that's why it looks like these people. Daniel's saying this for the future. He hasn't seen these people that have come into power yet. Okay? And then John is saying, hey, here's this Antichrist. He looks like the leopard, the bear, and the lion that we've seen before. Okay? And John is living in a time where the Romans are taking over. They are the new beast that is being called. Okay? Daniel 7, verse 7. Then in my vision that night I saw a fourth beast. This would be Rome. Terrifying and dreadful and very strong. It devoured and crushed its victims with huge iron teeth and trampled their remains beneath its feet. It was different from any other beast, and it had 10 horns. Yay! And as I was looking at the horns, suddenly another small horn appeared among them. 3 of the first horns were torn out by the roots to make room for it. This little horn had eyes like human eyes and a mouth that was boasting arrogantly. Oh, just crazy, crazy stuff. And again, verse 20 and 21 that we read. I asked about the 10 horns of the fourth beast's head and the little horn that came up afterwards and destroyed the 3 of the other horns. This horn had seemed greater than the others, had human eyes and human mouth, boasting arrogantly. It waged wars against the holy people and defeating them. Okay, so this fourth beast, verse 23, is the fourth world power that will rule the earth. It will be different from all the others. It will devour the whole world, trampling and crushing everything in its path. Its 10 horns are 10 kings who will rule that empire. So this all now makes better sense, knowing what is being said about the Antichrist. That was all about the tribulation time. Okay? I know this is long, but it's all tied together. Now, we have a fatal wound and healed. Revelation 13:3. I saw that one of the heads of the beast seemed wounded beyond recovery, but the fatal wound was healed. The whole world marveled at this miracle and gave allegiance to the beast. Okay, so you have the dragon, you have the beast, and here pretty soon, chapter 14, we'll get the second beast, which is the false prophet. So let's just say these 3 things right now. Dragon and God, not equal. We're not equal here, okay? But we talked about this. Dragon imitates God. Satan is imitating God because he has no imagination. So you have the dragon, you have Satan, you have God, you have his son, the Antichrist. The son was killed and brought back to life. The Antichrist is wounded beyond recovery and be brought back to life. And then we have the Holy Spirit and you have the false prophet. Okay? So let's keep going with this and wrap this up here pretty soon. So now he's turning on Israel, 13:5. Then the beast was allowed to speak great blasphemies against God, and he was given authority to do whatever he wanted for 42 months. So there you have 3.5 years. Okay, 3 years, 6 months. He spoke terrible words of blasphemy against God, slandering his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. And the beast was allowed to wage war against God's holy people. There it is again, okay? So the Antichrist is waging war. He's turned on Israel. And everybody worshipped him. Now, everyone who worshipped the beast, all the people who belong to this world worship the beast. They are the ones whose names are not written in the book of life. Another reason for you to be happy. Your name is written in the book of life, and you are not worshiping the beast. Okay? And that's the next one is, anyone with ears to hear should listen and understand. It doesn't say what the Spirit's saying to the churches. It's saying to the people here who have been left behind. Okay. Now let's talk about the false prophet here in a minute. Let's just get this up here right now. I got a chart, so I'm just going to do this with the beast out there. This is chapter 13, verse 11 to the end of the chapter, 11 through 18. Another beast come out of the earth. Again, he is either voted into power, and we're thinking he could be the next pope or the person in charge of the religious part of the world. Remember, the Vatican will be empty, assumably that everybody's a Christian and they get raptured out. So there'll be this pull to have people take over. So let's stop for a second and take the time to understand what 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 said. Okay. Sorry. Don't you remember that I told you about all this when I was with you, and you know what is holding him back? So let's go back to verse 2. Don't be so easily shaken or alarmed by those who say that the day of the Lord has already begun. Don't believe them, even if they claim to have had a spiritual revelation or supposedly from us. Don't be fooled by what they say, for that day will not come until there is a great rebellion against God. Remember, and Satan's thrown down to the earth during this time period. Okay? He will exalt himself and defy everything that people call God and every object of worship. He will even sit in the temple of God, claiming that he himself is God. So that's about to happen here in Revelation. Verse 7, for this lawlessness is already at work secretly, and it will remain a secret until the one who's holding it back steps out of the way. That's the rapture, and the Holy Spirit's taken out. Then the man of lawlessness will be revealed, but the Lord Jesus will slay him with the breath of his mouth and destroy him by the splendor of his coming. That's Armageddon. Okay, now here's what I wanted to read. Verse 9, 10, and 11. This man will come to do the work of Satan. So here we're talking about the Antichrist. He'll have counterfeit power. Satan gave him his power, his throne, and his authority. And signs and miracles. He will use every kind of evil deception to fool those on their way to destruction. All right? So he does all these miracles. Chapter 13. Let's just read a couple things here. Verse 12, he exercised all the authority of the first beast, and he required all the earth and its people to worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. So here's the false prophet requiring everybody to worship the first beast. And he was given all the authority that the first beast has, that Satan gave him. So all three of them have all this authority and miracles and stuff that they do. He required all the people of the earth to worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. He did astounding miracles, even making fire flash down to earth from the sky while everyone was watching. So he has fire come down from heaven, and then it just says all the miracles. And with all the miracles he was allowed to perform on behalf of the first beast, he deceived all the people who belong to this world. Okay? He will use every kind of evil deception to fool those on their way to destruction because they refuse to love and accept the truth that would save them. Think about how justice is perverted today and how people are literally turning their backs on the truth. When you talk to them, they just turn around and start screaming. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear what the truth is. And then verse 11, which is the scariest part. Not only are the people deceived, but it says, so God will cause them to be greatly deceived, and they will believe all the lies that they're being told by the Antichrist and the false prophet. Okay? Scary, scary stuff. Okay, and it goes on in chapter 13 again. He deceived all the people. He ordered the people to make a great statue of the first beast, who was fatally wounded and then came back to life. So they make a statue of the Antichrist. He was then permitted to give life to the statue so it could speak. So now there's life in the statue and it can speak, and it deceives the people even more. And the statue of the beast commanded that anyone refusing to worship it must die. So not only are the people dying from the judgments from God, but they're also dying from the stupidity of the rule that's happening. Okay, and we talked about the mark. We have all these different marks that we talked about. Genesis 4:15, Ezekiel 9:4, Revelation 7:2-8. This is the mark that is the famous one. Okay? He required everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to be given a mark on the right hand or on the forehead. You can't buy and sell or have a job or anything without the mark. Okay. That's the false prophet. So let's wrap this up with chapter 14. This is another breath that he's taking. He's talking about the 144,000. We already talked about the 144,000 earlier. And I saw a lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him were 144,000 who had his name and his father's name written on their heads. And I heard a sound from heaven like a roar of mighty ocean waves or the rolling of loud thunder. It was like the sound of many harpists. Okay. This great choir sang wonderful songs, okay? No one could learn the song except the 144,000. They're pure as virgins. They've told no lies. They are without blame. So that's describing the 144,000 that had come on the scene in chapter 11, okay? And Jesus is standing on Mount Zion at this point. Then we have the three angels. The first angel goes out and evangelizes the whole world. Doesn't win everybody to Christ. It's just they go out and they can't be touched. They evangelize. Okay, 14:6. Second angel tells us that Babylon has fallen. The great city has fallen. Okay, we talked about that. It says it twice. It fell once in previous history. It's going to fall again. And here's the thing. Babylon isn't talked about being destroyed until chapter 18. This is chapter 14. Another reason for us to understand that this is something that John is writing down, trying to catch up and do all this stuff and make sure everything's written down so we get it. He has all these things in order, and then he says, here are all these players, and oh yeah, here's Babylon. Don't forget, it's fallen as well. So in these three chapters, 12, 13, 14, he's condensed everything into these chapters, this time frame that he's seeing these things. And then he's going to break out and pick up with the last seven judgments, okay? Anyone who worships the beast and his statue or sets his mark on the forehead or on the hand must drink the wine of God's anger. So here we're getting closer. This is the second angel talking about these. No, the third angel is telling the judgment, what's going to happen, the sentencing. Okay, and has been poured full strength into God's cup of wrath, and they will be tormented with fire and burning sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and the Lamb. The smoke of their torment will rise forever and ever, and they will have no relief day or night, for they have worshipped the beast and his statue and have accepted the mark of his name. Okay, that is the great white throne judgment there. Okay, yeah, the people who receive the mark of the beast at the second coming, they're going to be thrown into hell, but they don't get to go to the lake of fire until the great white throne judgment. Okay, so they will have to suffer through all of that stuff in hell and then be thrown into the lake of fire. Okay, Matthew 13, 39 through 40. The enemy who planted the... Is that right? Matthew 13, 39 to 40. Okay, the enemy who planted the weeds among the wheat is the devil. He's talking about the seeds that are planted on the dry ground, the rocks, or in fertile soil. But the enemy who planted the weeds among the wheat is the devil. So weeds, the weeds among the wheat. So there are bad people among the good people. That person who planted those is the devil. The harvest is the end of the world, and the harvesters are the angels. We're about to talk about the harvest. Just as the weeds are sorted out and burned in the fire, lake of fire, so it will be at the end of the world. Okay, and I didn't mark my place in Revelation, sorry. Good thing I know where it's at. All right, so back to Revelation 14. we start to talk about the harvest and the winepress. So in chapter 14, verse, let's start with 14. Then I saw a white cloud, and seated on the cloud was someone like the Son of Man. He had a gold crown on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand. Son of Man, we notice to be Jesus, so we're saying this is Jesus. He's described as, no, I'm sorry, not an angel. He's someone like the Son of Man. It doesn't say angel, okay? So he swings his sickle and harvests the good people of the earth at the second coming. Again, this is chapter 14. We haven't had this other stuff yet, okay? And then we go and read the other, an angel comes, and he has a sickle. Swing your sickle now to gather the clusters of grapes from the vines of the earth, for they are ripe for judgment. Notice that the first swinging of the sickle that Jesus does there, it doesn't say anything about judgment. Okay? So those people who have given their lives to Christ in the tribulation, they are saved from it. Okay. Swing your sickle now to gather the cluster of grapes from the vines of the earth, for they are ripe for judgment. So the angel swings his sickle over the earth and loads the grapes into the great winepress of God's wrath. The grapes were trampled in the winepress outside the city. This is Armageddon. And the blood flowed from the winepress in a stream about 180 miles long and as high as a horse's bridle. So with the breath of his mouth, they are annihilated. We talked about this before. This is such a horrible, instantaneous thing where they are just, like you see in movies of vampires that get stabbed and they just, the blood just goes everywhere and there's nothing left but all this blood. That's kind of what it's going to be like. And you have the armies of the world. We're talking, there's 3 billion people left so far from what we have calculated. This is going to be at the end of the tribulation time. Don't know how many people are left, but you can probably bank on being 1 billion people in this army at Armageddon, and they're just annihilated. I mean, think about how much blood there would have to be 180 miles long, as high as a horse's bridle. That's a lot of people. Okay, so that is the end of chapter 14, and that's the end of your day 363. Take your time. Make sure you're taking notes over this and you have your charts. And we take another moment here for chapter 15, and we get right into the bowl judgments, so the last 7 judgments, the fall of Babylon, and Christ's return, Armageddon. So I'll see you tomorrow.